Welcome back. Today we're going to be improving our spawner node, making it much more versatile. There's a lot to do, so let's first go over our objectives. We want to be able to spawn a variety of different scenes. We want to be able to spawn an individual scene any number of times. We want the ability to define groups of scenes to be spawned. And finally, we're going to add a little bit of randomness into the mix. It's a whole bunch to cover, so let's get started. Let's open up our spawner script and load in a few more scenes. We could create individual variables for each scene, but in the interest of keeping our code nice and tidy, we're going to load our scenes into a dictionary. We'll create a variable with the unfortunate name enemyDict and populate it with scenes. Now we can spawn any one of those scenes by inserting the dictionary key into our spawn method. Let's try it out. Aha! The green one spawns, just like we told it to. Alright, let's keep going. So before we get too much further, I want to modify the spawn position argument from the last video and make sure that the input it takes is a vector2. Now it's going to cause an error down here. All we need to do is remove that .global position from the spawn position. Alright, let's go ahead and comment out our process function for now and add some more arguments to our spawn method. Alright, so first we'll add a spawn amount, and this is going to determine how many times a scene is going to be spawned, so we'll want that to be a whole number. So we'll say that it needs to be an integer. So in addition to how many times an object is going to spawn, we also need to know how often it's going to spawn. So we're going to put in some arguments for that. First, we're going to ask in the first place, is there any time between spawning? And it'll be a boolean, true or false. And we'll also ask it for a minimum time and a maximum time. And we make both of those floats because that's the type of input that the timer accepts, and I want to be consistent. All right, let's also ask if we want a random time. This random time, we'll make that a boolean. And do we want something that's random per spawn? So if you were to spawn, say, 5 guys, each one would come out at a different rate. We'll also make that a boolean. Now, looking back at our objectives, we need to add in some arguments for grouping enemies. Now, I'll go over that next, but for now, let's just create some arguments. Is random spawn, it's a boolean, and also is group, also a boolean. Okay, I'm going to just increase the size of the text here. Alright, so let's make a predefined group of objects to spawn. We'll need an array. We'll call it group1, and in it we'll reference a number of the keys in our enemy dictionary. It looks pretty good. Now, once we get it all coded down below, we'll be able to spawn this group in order or at random, which brings us to our next subject, which is the random number generator. Okay, so Godot contains a built-in random number generator that's responsible for things like shuffling arrays, which is how we're going to be utilizing it. It also contains some random number generating functions, but there's a separate random number generator class that has some additional methods that are better for that, and we want to utilize it. So we'll go ahead and instantiate a new random number generator class at the top of the script. Alright, now we're ready to start writing our spawn logic. It's going to get a little bit complicated, so let's block it out with comments. So before we begin telling the computer to start spawning things, we need to determine a couple things. First, we need to determine how long our spawn timer is going to be, and then we need to determine whether or not we'll be randomizing a group. Okay, so first we're going to create a new variable called spawn time, and we will make it a float. Then we're going to check to see if this spawn is even timed or not, and if it's not, we're going to set our spawn time to 0. If it is a timed spawn, we'll then check to see if the time is random. If so, we'll randomize our random number generator's seed and then set the spawn time to a random float range between our minimum and maximum time. If our spawn time is not random, we then set our spawn time to our minimum time. So let's first create a loop so we can execute this code as many times as our spawn amount. We'll then check to see if we're spawning a group, and if so, we ask if we're randomizing the order of the group. If that's true, we'll randomize Godot's built-in seed and then shuffle a spawn type. Then we'll check to see if each object has a random spawn time. If this is the case, we'll use a for loop to iterate through our array, each time randomizing our random number generator seed and setting our spawn time between our minimum time and maximum time. Now that our spawn time has been determined, we do a yield and instantiate a SceneTree timer, set its time to the spawn time, and the yield to end on the timeout signal. And once our timer expires, we're then free to spawn our object using the same code we wrote in the previous video. If our group is not using random times per spawn, we'll use a similar for loop to iterate through our enemy array and spawn each member of our group. And finally, if what you're spawning is not a group of objects, but a single one, we still need to check if it will utilize random spawn times per spawn, and if not, we'll just spawn our object as usual. So let's go ahead and test this out. We'll rewrite our spawn call up here, and our spawn type will be the group. Our spawn position will be the position's global position. Its spawn amount will be 4, why not? And will it be timed? Yes, it will. Right, our minimum time is going to be half a second. Our maximum time is going to be 2.5 seconds. We're going to give it an initial random starting time. And we are going to say, yeah, you have a random spawn time per enemy spawned. And is it a random order? No. We're not going to have it a random order. We're going to do it the way we wrote it out in the group up top. And is it a group? Yes, it certainly is. So let's give this a shot. Alright, if we test it out, we find we get an error. And it is really simple to fix. We just need to change the spawn type to just S. It's the variable we're iterating through in our for loop. We'll try it again, and alright, let's hit enter and see what happens. And out they come with random spawn times and in the same order that we put them in the array. So success. So feel free to play around with the options, find what you like. You can do a whole lot with this. In the next video, we're going to look at some use cases and show you how you can utilize it, and might also refine it just a little bit more. So stay tuned, like, and subscribe. Have a great rest, like a great rest to your whatever.